Mm-hmm.
Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, ladies and gentlemen, wherever you may be in the world. Welcome to today's conversation. I'm Sarah Jane. Welcome to my co-host, Enolia. Hello, Enolia.
Hello, everyone.
And welcome to our two guests, David McLeod, who has joined us before. David, welcome. And Scott Holmes. Scott, welcome. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you. So apparently, yeah.
Okay, right.
I apologize.
The topic, we're having a few glitches with Scott. We can hear him, but occasionally he seems to freeze on us. But that's fine. Providing we can hear him, that's the most important thing. The topic of our program tonight is right around the corner. And I've invited David and Scott to join us as they are co-authors, along with some others, of Find Your Voice, Save Your Life, Volume 4, Transcendent Men, Real Stories. And it's great to have them here because we've talked a lot from the feminine perspective of things, but we felt it was important to actually balance that out from a masculine perspective, but also having Enolia and myself here as well. So David, while Scott's having a few glitches, and hopefully he's going to be able to actually participate in this conversation. Scott, even if we can only just see the round picture of you, we'd obviously rather see you, but providing we can hear you, that's the most important thing, that we can hear you. But we will start with David. David, share a little, because I asked obviously the two of you to choose a title and to choose the topic. So share a little about yourself, what you do, and why this topic is obviously so important to you.
Well, thank you, Sarah and Enolia. It's great to be here. And well, I've been on your show a few times now, I think, and you've been on mine. My name is David McLeod. I am a certified master life coach. I also do a lot of writing. I have a couple of websites that I create and maintain. What I really do, I think, is I encourage, support, and empower people to live the best possible lives they can. That's really what I'm trying to do. Now, what level of success I have, I guess that kind of depends on what other people say about it. But for me, that's just about elevating my own consciousness to the maximum level possible, and then sharing what I can with other people about how they can do the same thing. To me, that's really about the best I can do. Now, as far as this topic is concerned, Scott actually approached me about contributing to this book because I had written I had collaborated on a number of other books before. And he heard about me through a mutual friend. And he talked to me about his topic. And of course, at the beginning, he didn't really have this notion of transcendence in mind. He just wanted to get some men's stories together. And I thought, cool, I'd love to do that. And well, I'm going to just leave it there for now. I mean, the idea of getting more men awakened in the world is a big deal for me. And that's something that I really hope that we can do. And the idea of something just around the corner, well, that's kind of a magical title that we're going to get into as we progress. So I'll just leave it there.
Okay. Scott, can you hear me? Okay. Right. Scott, we seem to have lost you. I don't know whether you can hear me, but we definitely don't appear to be able to hear you.
Oh. Now he's left the room again.
Yes, but hopefully this time he'll come back in and you'll be able to stay in.
That's right. Yeah.
So I think, sort of from my perspective, I was reading through the write-up, and it's relevant for every single person. But for this particular program, obviously, it's very much about the men, sort of men who, especially sort of obviously the era that we were brought up in. Yes.
There's the cover of the book, and that artwork, by the way, was done by one of the men who contributed a chapter to the book. I agree. The book was written by men, and mostly it's about their stories and what's going on in their lives. But what we noticed as we were writing this, and as we're seeing the responses from people, is a lot of women really appreciate the content of this book, and they benefit from it as well.
Yeah.
Scott, I see you're here. Are you able to talk, buddy?
Can you hear me at all?
Yes, we can hear you.
Oh, good. Okay.
Yes.
Good. Then my swearing didn't come across. Okay.
No.
I am so sorry for the glitches. I am so sorry for that. When we tried these out, it was wonderful. But David, I did hear you, and we didn't really have a working title when we started. It was kind of a conglomeration, a collaboration, a true collaboration of men trying to put this together. It took about 18 months in order to get the 21 authors that were in the book. As you know, it's as you interview people, there aren't quite as many men involved in the modalities that you practice, and it's that awareness. I've always been, and I know David sometimes is also this type. He's the unicorn in the room. I'm in a yoga class, and there are 25 women and me. I'm in a Zoom chat, and there are 22 women and me. And so there was that male perspective that we wanted to bring to bear. It's that being able to tell the stories. I think, David, when you were saying that that women find it really interesting, is because they didn't really think men thought like they did. They didn't really think that men felt, because men don't have an opportunity to share. They don't usually. They usually have the mask on. They usually are playing the role. They are usually speaking through those roles instead of through their heart. Right. And in doing that, and listening and sharing and showing the vulnerabilities and sharing our stories, it really came through that we're all much more alike than we are different in so many ways.
Yeah. So Scott, do you want to share a little about sort of, because obviously you were very much a part of the book, but share a little about yourself, because obviously why you did the book was why this is so important. This topic is so important to you.
It really was, because it was my own journey in realizing, when I reached out to the different modalities, whether it was with Reiki or with polarity therapy that I do, or with Theta, I was the masculine energy in the room, and the women that we connected with, there was always that balance. You know, David and I have always talked about this, about, you know, it's kind of hard to walk up to a guy and say, hey, you know what? You know how you can be a better man? Find your inner female, find your sacred feminine, find that part of you. And they all, you know, after they punch you in the nose, it's a matter of that balance within yourself, that compassion. And for me, it was finding compassion. I'd always played the roles of caregiver. I've played the roles of father, of leader, of, you know, just always had to maintain that. And it wasn't until I found my heart, that compassion. I'd say it's a million miles between my head and my heart, and it took a long time to get there. And once I got there, it changed my entire life, how I reacted to everyone and everything, how my view of life changed, how the people reacted to me so differently, and it made me so much more welcoming to everybody I come in contact with, rather than having that hard shell over the top. So I do a practice. I have clients, and in doing this, I talk about clearing, about balancing, about energetically, but also within themselves, that balance of male and female, which I think is so important. Friends of mine who I've worked with have found balance, and they've found someone because they were a different vibration. They were more open. They were more understanding, and that they had a fuller life because of that. And that's really where we're at with this. I think, David, you find that men don't open up and become vulnerable until they hit the very bottom. They hit the pit. They are maxed out on their ism, whatever that is, whatever their life has been, their divorce, drugs, death, whatever it is, where they finally hit that, they come to that realization that, man, I may need some help. I may need to open up. I may need to be vulnerable for a change. And it really, in the work, doing the work, we find that this is what the case time and time again.
Yeah. Enolia.
So I'm sitting here listening to it and I'm thinking about all of the encounters of the men that I've engaged on this path, on this spiritual path. And I guess because I came up in shamanism, that I see a lot more men in that practice than I would just a spiritual, path. So my question to you would be that, what is it that is lacking for men to have a comfort level to be able to walk a more spiritual path? I know that we have a lot of cultural conditioning, and in that cultural conditioning is limited thinking of what the role of a man should be versus the role of a woman should be, and that men don't show their feelings and so on and so forth, right? And so much so that, most of the women we encounter have a more masculine purview than even balance for themselves. So what is it that needs to shift for men to be able to take that first step, that first leap of faith?
Well, the first thing I'd like to say about that is I think there's a lot more men on the spiritual path than most of us realize. I think that men in general, at least in Western culture, have a basic view of themselves as being the breadwinner, the caregiver, the one who is supposed to protect the family. All of those things are very important in many men's lives. So it's not really accurate to say that they aren't on the path. It's just that they have a different way of getting there. So that's the first thing I want to say. The second thing is, I believe that we do have a huge amount of cultural conditioning that we have to overcome. And it's not about feminism. It's not about masculism. It's about having people understand the truth of who they really are, whether they're men or women. I think if we all can understand that truth and begin to express that truth and know that it's safe to do so, then we all can grow and expand. But often, because of cultural conditioning, whether you're male or female, we are kind of, the culture wants to keep us within these boxes and have us stay in our own lane, so to speak. So to deviate from that lane means taking a risk that people in your sphere of influence, people that you deal with, are not going to like you, or they're going to criticize you, or they're going to judge you. And so many people, men and women alike, are afraid of that judgment, even though the truth of the matter is most of the time people really aren't judging you. They're too busy worried about their own lives. But that's the kind of stuff that we have to deal with. We have to get people to understand that whatever is holding them back is something that's within. It's not something out there that's really holding them back. That's what we have to do, I think.
Scott.
What do you say, Scott?
I knew where David was going with this, and we've spoken about this many times, and I absolutely agree. It's about all of being there, being present. In the work that I do, it's about, if you are present, a lot of those roles, the gender roles, the jobs that you're supposed to do, the mask you're supposed to wear, how you're supposed to be, when you're present and you're dealing with somebody one-on-one, it doesn't matter who and what they are on the outside, what their role is, that you can be related, you can relate to each other, you can be yourself, and everything else goes away. When we travel, try to travel as extensively as I possibly can, that people all over the world, they all want the same thing. They want love, life, liberty, security, be able to grow with their family. They want all of those things, and there are no real differences in all of the people that I've ever met anywhere in the world, and everywhere one I've spoken to, and it's that kind of closeness, that closed. When people don't travel, when they don't learn, when they don't open up, that's where you get the rigidity. You know, skating your lane. You go to the lane. My dad, who I just lost the last year, he was his role. He was 87 years old, and he knew that his role was X, and he would say to me, "What do you mean I have to change? I've been doing the same thing since I was 20. Why would I have to change?" He was 87. So it's that willingness to change. It's that openness, that understanding. Yes, in shamanism, there's more male. I find I'm going to India in March, and it's, the priests are mostly male when you go there. It almost seems in a higher, the higher elevations, it's men, and it's on my journey I found that there's so much more women because they're much more open to change. I know guys that have worn the same hairstyle for 45 years. Okay. Women change their hair every 3 months. They're much more open to changing color that they wear, their shoes. Men, if they find a comfortable pair of shoes, will buy the same exact pair of shoes for 40 years.
That's right.
Men find that comfort, and they realize they don't have to change much because the same expectations of them. But that, for me, it was in the story. It was my wife passing that after a prolonged illness, where I found myself, I didn't know who I was anymore because of all the roles I'd played. And
right.
so it was that learning and kind of coming into myself and realizing all those layers and peeling the onion and getting all those layers off and extracting everything to get down to realize who I was. And it was my better 18-year-old self, by the way. That when you're 18 years old and you have every answer to every question that ever was, and you know everything. But now I have experience in order to be my best 18-year-old self. But it really, you had said about men being a part of it. It's just being open to it. And what I found is having a safe space, and men don't always get that safe space.
Yeah, and I think it does go all the way back to childhood, doesn't it? It goes what you witnessed going on within the home. That was how as a boy you were watching, and as a girl we were watching, and that's the perception of life within a family. And it's can we step out of that? I've worked with both men and women who've been abused, and my heart goes out for both. And abuse comes in many forms. It's not just about physical abuse. Some of it's physical, some of it's emotional, some of it's mental. And if you've ever been through that, and it's then how do you react to that? Then and you use the word change. And I don't think it's about any of us changing. It's about us growing, isn't it? Growing into who we really are. Being able to let go, like you said, of the layers of the onion, being able to let go of the conditioning that we have had, and sort of being able to say that aspect of what I thought was meant to be about, life was meant to be about, that doesn't resonate with me. And allowing ourselves to actually say, what feels right for me? What doesn't feel right for me? It's that learning to say yes to yourself. It's that learning to, and it is about learning to sort of to be truer to you so that you can find out who you are. And it usually takes, sadly, some sort of traumatic experience, loss, or something that occurs that helps us to wake up to the fact that there is a different way of being, that we can grow and find ourselves. Any comments, Enolia?
So in finding ourselves, I was sitting there listening to David's comment about, you know, feeling lost at a certain period of time, you know, or was it Scott? That feeling lost at a period of time, especially when he lost his wife, was Scott, and when he lost his wife. There's a time when we all go through that loss of self, when we've been partnered for many, many years, both men and women, and that somewhere in the midst of being that partner, and then that partner is no longer there, whether it's divorce or whether it's the loss of that partner, there is a point where we've lost how to define ourselves, because I don't know if it's because we've shared so much or because we haven't had to be present because somebody was always compensating for what we weren't present to. I'm not quite sure. What are your thoughts around that? Because there's a lot of people at this stage in life that are going through this right now. And in speaking to their hearts, helping them to find themselves, helping them to understand that what they bring is of value, and it's okay to show that emotion, because here it is, you haven't had to, and then life just suddenly changes so directly and so traumatically from one extreme to the other. You know, some people are going from a house full of people to just being by themselves, or just being by themselves sometimes in that regard. And the children leave and the partner's not there, and it's devastating. So what would you share in that regard?
Okay. I guess I said earlier, and this is one of the things that I truly believe, is that there's nothing more important than knowing the truth of who we really are, who I really am. Now, with all that said, I would estimate that a vanishingly small number of people come into this world knowing exactly who they are and maintaining that knowledge throughout their lives. I would say there's very few people like that. People like Jesus, for example, who had a very clear purpose and lived that purpose right from the time of his birth until the time of his death. People like that are pretty rare. Most of us, I would say, probably a 98% of us, go through this conditioning process that's kind of brought to us by our parents, who very well-meaningly tell us, this is how you should behave, this is what you should do, these are the things that you should accomplish in your life in order to have a happy life, and so forth. That's what most of us experience. And you talk about partnership. Partnership is, you know, we are thrust into relationship very early in our lives without really knowing anything about how relationships work. So we assume that part of the job in a relationship is to, you know, to give in to the other person, to compromise and to, you know, try to show up the way they expect you to show up. We do all those things trying to, from a place of love, I believe, trying to create a harmonious life. And it doesn't always work. And I can speak from personal experience. I know that by doing that, I ended up putting the truth of who I am back into the background. And instead, as Sarah mentioned, I put on masks. And I think Scott mentioned this too. I put on masks so I could show up the way I thought other people wanted to see me. Well, in the process of doing that, I basically just created a scenario for myself where I just started getting more and more resentful and angry and unhappy throughout my life. And it wasn't until I was in my early 40s that I had a serious enough experience that it was like a 2x4 across the side of my head. It woke me up, but it wasn't the kind of wake-up call that instantly transformed everything. It was just a new awareness that I had to do something. Well, once I realized that I had to do something, it turned out that figuring out what that something was another big adventure. So it took me another 10 or 12 years before I finally figured out exactly what I was supposed to be doing. And it's only now, I'm approaching 70 years old now, and it's only now that I am really, truly understanding the truth of who I am. I have re-embraced it. I am loving it. And I'm not ever going to, it's okay to compromise a position or a situation, but I will never, ever compromise myself ever again. So there's a huge difference. And that some people can learn that very quickly. And that's part of the reason that I'm doing this work, is to try and help them to learn what I've learned at a much less or a much more compressed time frame, so they don't have to go through the same challenges that I went through. So I don't know if that answers your question or not, but that's my answer anyway. And, I'm sure Scott has a different perspective, but that's just how it comes up for me.
Scott, are you there?
Yes, I am. You can
good.
hear me.
Excellent. Yes, we can hear you. Carry on.
Good. And I apologize for the video. David can't really enunciate it well enough about how, most of the men that I've spoken to come about and find themselves. There's the expression, you don't have to hit me up twice upside the head with a tire iron to make me understand things. Well, some guys you have to, but for me, with my wife gone and having to go all through that, you're right. The house was empty. My girls were gone. The only one I had to talk to was the cat, and really wasn't into long conversations. So it was very, very quiet. And in that quiet, I saw that I was very uncomfortable with being alone by myself and who I was, and not being able to find it. And in the relationship, and I don't know if all of you are of a certain age, but I was always taught that when you're married, you become one. And so one is indistinguishable from the other. And so you have that. So you compromise all those parts of you in order to get that into a nice sphere, a spherical ball, so that there are no, jagged edges or anything else. And so you just push and pull. And what I've realized in coming on to the other side is that 1 + 1 = 3. And that is that if you're each your own individual self, and you are fully yourselves, and the 3 is the relationship, what you give to that relationship, everything of you that you give to that relationship, it becomes an entity unto itself. And so it's a much wiser, cleaner, more understanding way to live, because you maintain your integrity of who you are. That's so hard. And David, you're so right. There are very few people I've ever met who come into this life and they're very, very special. They have this special energy about them. They have this special vibration about them, and they just know who they are when they were born. They knew who they're going to be, and they just walk that walk. And that's so unusual. And I still, to this day, I'm 65 years old now, and I'm just really learning and liking who I am and what I'm going to be. When I was 18 years old, I wanted to be an author. Well, it wasn't until a year ago that I became the author. I also wanted to be the start and shortstop for the Boston Red Sox, but that never happened. But
you still got some years left.
I got some years left, yes. But it's those pieces of you, and you go back to realizing what you wanted to do, what before life became life, and you started to work and work 3 jobs and have 3 children and walk through your journey. But you realize what you really want to do, and it brings you joy. And in that joy, I really find, I'm sure all of you, and the question I ask all of you is, where you find your joy, isn't that, you guys bring this joy to this, to these interviews. You bring that because it is a part of you. It is what you do. It's what you believe. It's what you have. And you just exude that. And that's where people are looking to get to. And what they don't realize all the time, and it's not a destination, it's a way of how you work your life each and every day. You walk in that joy and everything can be fine. Everything is right. Even when it's not, it'll be okay.
As the film says, if it's not okay, it's not the end or something, isn't it?
That's right.
But I think we do this. We're all doing this to support people to realize you can come out the other side of the experiences you're having, you've had. And the important thing that so many of us haven't been taught is that it's really important to be the love of your own life, to love yourself, to respect yourself, to trust yourself, to believe in yourself. All those things we maybe encourage other people to do, but we don't believe it about ourselves. And then you get the people who turn around and say, love yourself, that's being selfish. And it's being able to get over, around, whatever, without hitting them by the 2x4. But it's about, do you know what? That's your stuff. If you want to think that loving yourself means you're being selfish, then that's your problem. It's not mine. Because I see loving myself as being able to bring so much more love to others.
Right.
And
another question you might ask is, and what's wrong with being selfish?
Yeah.
So now you can start to conjure up, what are the real judgments that you have about this word selfish?
And that's their understanding of the word selfish. You've got,
exactly,
because of the way, and especially obviously when this comes from an 85-year-old mother, who's obviously like just over 20 years older than me. And she's absolutely comes from that era of you have to do everything for other people. And as a woman, as a mother, as a wife, she didn't even come on the bottom of the list of people they thought about. So I'm still coming from that era of her and of my grandparents, because that's how it was. The little woman stayed at home. And once my mother became pregnant with me, she didn't go back out to work until after my youngest sister was born. And my grandmother, the minute she married, she wasn't allowed to work anymore, period. And yet she'd been a nurse. And you were talking about occupations earlier, and people think about nurses as being women. Why can't men be nurses? It's not a job. It isn't. Women have to do this job and men have to do that job. Women can be doctors, men can be nurses. It really is getting out of the stereotypes and helping people to realize that loving yourself isn't selfish. Respecting and honoring yourself and saying yes to yourself is not selfish.
Right.
It's
well, and you can even take it a step further. I mean, a lot of people will quote Jesus or misquote Jesus and said, Jesus said to love your neighbor. I say that is true. He did say that, but he also said the phrase, love your neighbor as yourself. What could that possibly mean other than you have to love yourself fully before you can love your neighbor? Some people just don't want to accept that,
Yeah, brilliantly put, David. Brilliantly put. Because yes, I was raised a Catholic, and it's love thy neighbor as thyself. Yeah,
absolutely. What have you found that this younger generation, and now you have grandchildren now, that they don't have that gender roles anywhere near as rigid as we did? they have a much more flexibility. They have much more of an understanding of what the roles are, what their possibilities are, what their jobs could be, what their life could entail. They have a much broader sense of what they can do. Have you found that?
Enolia, to have a share.
I agree with Scott, and I want to take what David said earlier, and I would take it a little bit further, Scott, in the respect that, like, the millennials, the Generation Z, they don't have a problem expressing their feelings. I think it's even more so on the other end that they're expressing their feelings and they're not getting the responses possibly, and I can't say this for sure, that they're looking for, okay, pre-pandemic. And I just finished doing a little bit of research for something else. So I happen to know that these numbers, that the millennials are at a highest rate of suicide ever nowadays. Wow. And they're looking for help and they want help. So there's a major gap between we as baby boomers versus the millennials coming in, or the hipsters, or what you want to call the Generation Z, our younger generations. I agree with you. They're coming in, they're very comfortable with feminine, masculine. I see more men wearing dresses and not even thinking twice about it. And I mean, not dresses, but like skirts or whatever is comfortable for them. You go to a concert, you wear a skirt, you wear what you feel like wearing, and you don't think twice about it. Whereas we would never do that. The rules that we came up with are different. So how do you work with, and what appeals to that generation? Because like David, you just said, you like a 2x4 over the head and it woke you up and then you navigated, but they're not, some of them are not navigating. They're saying it's too much.
Well, and
then they're giving.
Right. To be fair about it, I think if we just look at, well, we've been around long enough that we can see some huge differences in the way things are happening in the world. When I was a kid, yes, things were pretty relaxed. I could go out and I could play outside in the street. I didn't have to worry about, weird guys coming up the street or any of that stuff. And I noticed when I had kids, we lived in a pretty good neighborhood. So my kids did have some freedom to play around in outside in the cul-de-sac out there. But I noticed that I still had some concern about their safety. You just don't know who's going to be out there. So I remember teaching our kids not to speak to strangers, and what is a stranger really? 99% of the time, a stranger is really nothing more than a friend you haven't met yet. That's really the case for most of us. So we've seen these shifts in energy. We've become more and more frightened and safety oriented and risk averse over the course of the last 70 years. And to the point where it's no wonder that so many people are just afraid to step outside and do anything, So, I mean, most of these millennials, I'm sure, would have no problem taking a black diamond ski slope down a hill on a bicycle, but to open their hearts and express themselves openly, that's a risk that most people aren't really willing to take because they just don't believe they can trust the people and the energy around them. That's part of the challenge that we're dealing with. And so what we have to do is find a way to help people, teach them how to create their own safe space for doing this. In other words, find the people that you do trust, connect with them, share with them, build your friendship, your relationships with those kinds of people, and set the boundaries so nobody else can come in unless you carefully vet them and make sure that they're, decent people. This is something that we just have to learn, and we have to keep practicing and refining our skills at. That's what I think.
Absolutely. Absolutely, David. I couldn't agree more. If I may, you talked about energy and vibrational level, and it's finding as we elevated, we we tousled the term transcendent when it was transcendent men, what it means, because everybody has a different definition of it. But it's about transcending where you are, that low point you are, that where you don't want to be, transcending those obstacles and becoming a better person. And as your vibration changes, your vibration elevates and gets higher. It gets harder and harder, it seems, to find people who are in the same vibrational level, that same energy, that same. Thank goodness for programs like this, because we can seek them out. That's the amazing thing. And thank you, the two of you, for really having this, because it's hard to find. When you're working with people, most of my clients, to your point, David, most of my clients are between 30 and 45, and they're looking for that balance. They're looking for that safe space. They're looking for that ability to grow beyond where they are, and they don't have the tools. They aren't taught that. Their parents didn't know about it, and now they're searching for that. And in dealing with them, you just give them the tools. We've done the research, we've done the work, we've done the learning, we've done that, and I just tell each and every one of them, thank you for your curiosity, thank you for your that trust, because they can trust each of you with what they're going to bring out, their vulnerabilities. That's the hardest thing. Most of my life, and I don't know about you, you always wondered about what you could share, because growing up and we're the process of being different was not always easy, because if you were different, you get pounded into that mold of where you should be. You get put into that lane to where you should be. And so being able to have that vibrational energy that you're dealing with all of the people that we now are able to speak to on this level is absolutely amazing. So that's that, finding that energy level. And the hard part about, peeling the onions off is you really, you lose some of those friendships. You lose some of those people that were close to you. You lose some of the things that you've always known, because you're becoming a newer you. You're becoming a higher vibrational you. And a lot of those things that you found comforting no longer fit. And that's that growing into yourself, that changing, and having that faith that what you're doing is right. So I find that I encourage, when I'm working with people, it's just that encouragement of, no, you're not crazy. Yes, this is really happening. And, just be able to embrace it. That's wonderful.
Beautiful.
I think it's difficult for the youngsters of today, isn't it? Because it's almost that generation gap, isn't there? It's because it's people of our age group who have started to actually really embrace this. We've been going through it for 20 odd years for ourselves, probably. And now we're bringing out the information. And a lot of the people who are being able to share, to understand, to empathize are of the grandparents' generation rather than necessarily the parents' generation. And they're struggling, and so the youngsters, the children, but they still could be children in their 20s, because we're still children. My mum's still alive, I'm still a child to her, but it's thinking about that. It's, where is that point? Who do they go to speak to? Because they're looking for that support, but sadly their parents aren't necessarily in the right place for growth themselves. Can they go to their grandparents? And for many, they may not have grandparents. My grandparents have been gone quite a long time, but the first one died when I was 19, and probably the one that would have understood me most. And that's the way of it. And they do talk about actually maybe the better people to bring the young children up are the grandparents, because they've had way more experiences of life. And that comes, I think, from, if I'm not much mistaken, reading Conversations with God. It's finding the people that you can open up to, as I think you were saying, David. It's finding the people you can open up to. And sadly, a lot of people look at our generation, and I think we are a lot younger than our parents were.
Yes.
Our
Yes.
age. We are massively younger. And when we think of my grandparents, we are way, way younger than they were at this age. And that's not a detriment to them. That is society. Look at some of the old black and white films and look at some of the famous stars of the day and think, you look old to me. They weren't old, but that was just how it came across. They looked older than their years to me. And it's encouraging then the younger generations to realize that the generation beyond their own parents have got way more life experience and potentially could be the ones. They can sound them out, but it's learning to be able to do that.
I think one thing that really has struck me, I was kind of talking about the differences between when I was a kid and what things are like now. There's been this kind of strange acceleration that's been going on for many years. It's like every year it seems like it's shorter and shorter and shorter, you know? So the time from January to December is like, bam, it's gone, you know? And I don't think that's just because we're getting older. I think it's because something else is shifting. And I've heard lots of people, you know, light sharers and love sharer people claiming that we're going through a transition from what they call 3D reality to 4D and 5D reality. Now, I can't in my mind consider the idea of 5D reality. I'm having a hard time understanding this whole 4D reality thing, but I understand that that's what we're doing. We're going through this transition, according to these people, and that's why we're seeing so much darkness and light showing up at the same time. We're seeing both of these becoming sharper and sharper and sharper in our awareness. And that is, to me, actually an amazing thing. Because the more we can see things, the more we understand the truth. And the more we understand the truth, the more we can know about who we really are. That's kind of what I'm noticing right now.
I just want to interject that I think it is imperative at the stage that we are at in life that we have these conversations constantly. That if we want to be in that position of, and I called it eldership, like I just was deemed in a matriarch, and the title is grandmother in the Ojibwe Nation. And I proudly stand in that eldership. And I have those harder conversations, and I hold space for young people. And it's imperative that you hold space for the men, because they don't have the conversations. It's the woman who sits there and asks the thing that you just wouldn't ask. And men need the opportunity to be able to share and be able to be asked the things that wouldn't be asked. And as a woman coach coaching men, I go there. I ask. But they need to be able to see other men ask and know that it's safe to have that conversation. So I applaud you tremendously. And I think it's very, very imperative that those who would be walking the path see the representation that's there so that this younger generation can feel safe and don't necessarily have to just look into the family stream of mom, dad, or grandparents in order to have that safe conversation. And so please share your book, let them know, and really take that stature. I always deem it like this. I get what you're saying about the time going fast. The time is going extremely fast. And I always look at it this way. I have every conversation with individuals, doesn't matter whether it's man or woman, as if it's the last one I get to share what's important and my passion about all the time. And to me, it's imperative because we don't know. The energy is just strange. And yes, the dark side of the moon is right there with the light, you know? And right. Every thought and every opinion that we voice counts. And I don't know if you're feeling that, but I'm feeling that. Everything that we say counts. There is no moment of, oh, I just let my hair down and I don't feel like being. No, every moment counts.
Love your passion.
Yeah,
So
I agree with that statement. And I think, but there's a way in which if every moment counts, I can see where people might go to the point where I can't let my guard down then. I can't relax. I can't do anything. And I first of all, I think that's a mistake to believe that. You can still be in grace and meditation and peace and have everything still count.
Being present.
And in fact, if you can come to that place of being grounded and centered in who you really are, then having everything count doesn't have that kind of pressure on you anymore. You know, it's now I can just simply enjoy everything that counts rather than necessarily influencing it.
Exactly. And I love that passion. I love that passion. By the way, this past summer, I was given the moniker of Grandfather Crane. And it was because they said you were a teacher, you're an elder, and you are here to teach. You are here to teach and guide the younger people. I wear that one very proudly, by the way. And it really, the passion that you say, I also say those things with clients, whether it's men or women, that they don't necessarily want to hear because I don't know if it's the last conversation I'm going to have with them. And it gets uncomfortable at times, but it's that passion for being present that you have, especially, that it just brings people to you. And if you live your life, and David, I know you espouse this all the time, when you live your life genuinely, when you live your life as who you are and very present, it changes. It changes the outcome, it changes the relationship, and it changes the life in the conversations that we have. And we need to have these constantly. And thank you all for bringing the conversations to everyone.
I think it's really important. I've been told off, you can't talk to people like that. And I really have. And I had somebody, I did an event, and I can't remember the conversation. I said something to this lady and she rang me afterwards. And she said, I was so cross with you. And I thought, oh dear, what did I say? And then she said to me, and she said, I thought about it. And she said, you're the only person who's ever been truly honest with me. So never, ever. And I look at it and I think, if I speak my truth, it doesn't have to be their truth. It doesn't have to be your truth. It has to be my truth. You have to speak your truth. If I speak my truth, my understanding, and that individual goes away and somebody else does it a week later, a year later, 10 years later, and they turn around and say, that funny woman that day at that event said that to me. I've done what I'm here to do. I've touched the light I'm here to touch. It doesn't matter how they think of me if what I have said has actually got through. even if it's taken that length of time. That's the most important thing. Be true to you, be open and honest. People don't have to like it, but unless you speak that truth, how are people going to then hear it a second time and a third time? And I know we've had these conversations before, David, about if you hear something 3 times, the universe is sending you a message. So we're coming to a close. So what I've just said, I've said, and I mean that. Speak your truth, folks. People may not like it, but speak it. Would you like, each one of you like to share just a little something that may support? And obviously, yes, I would say get in touch with any of us. Find somebody that resonates with you. That's really important. So Enolia, let's start with you and we'll let the guys finish.
Well, I'm going to give you a little bit of time because I'm going to ask David or Scott to read a little excerpt from the book that they think might be a thoughtful piece. So I'm going to talk while you're looking, but I just feel like it has to happen, you know. So I just wanted to share that it is imperative that we take the time to have the conversation and to share our hearts, even when the person isn't sharing, and that engagement leads by example, and that sometimes you don't understand what kind of impact you have on someone when you dare to just share that much and open your heart, and that is what makes the difference of it all, that you're willing to have the conversation, that you're opening your heart, that you have compassion about what you're sharing, that you would draw from your own personal experience, and that you would dare to say, okay, here it is, here I am, here's my vulnerability, and you don't even have to show yours. Just know that it's possible, and that it's capable, and that it's meaningful. And if we can all walk away with just that much, that makes the difference in the world.
Nice.
That's the contribution.
Beautiful. Thank you.
Thank you.
So which one of
You know, I hadn't really planned on reading from the book, but thank you for the invitation. And so what I did was I just flipped to a random page, and there's this paragraph that jumped out at me, and I had to figure out who wrote it. This is actually by Jerry Friedman, and his chapter 5 is called Becoming the Man My Children Would Want to Know. And the whole book has got some really, really amazing chapters. But the paragraph that jumped out at me is this: that deep inner work helped me gain insight into who I really am, and the family and other dynamics that led me to make the choices that I had been making previously, choices that were harmful to me as well as to others. It also helped me see that I could make different choices, healthy choices, not based on the false beliefs about myself and the world I learned from my parents at school or from Madison Avenue. So that's just a taste of some of the openness and vulnerability that you can find in this book. And I'll just put it up there again so you can see it. Find Your Voice, Save Your Life, Volume 4, Transcendent Men, Real Stories. And transcendence is not something it's not just a fancy buzzword. Transcendence is something that anyone can achieve if you set your mind to it. Once you find the truth of who you are, then you can begin that rise, that beautiful rise in accelerated enlightenment, if you like, that actually lifts you up and over all of the things that are holding you back in your life. That's what transcendence is to me. So it's right there, and it's right around the corner.
Scott?
Oh, you make it tough to follow you. You know that?
You can follow. You're good, man. You can do it.
So in just the intro, I have a small one. No matter what gets us there, know this: we always have ourselves to come back to. This book is meant for you, the man looking for more. It's not until we move outside ourselves, seek another way to view us, that true change, true healing occur. And it's about just letting go and allowing in, honestly. And it's allowing. I let this guy into my life. He's just absolutely wonderful. David is absolutely wonderful. He pokes the bear at times. He pops the balloon. He gives you a big hug, and really inspires. And he is the type of guy that anybody out there would be truly blessed to have as a coach, have as somebody that is kind of guiding them. He doesn't tell you what to do. He shows you how you can do that for yourself, and that is a wonderful thing. I want to thank you
for that, Scott.
You're very welcome. But I want to thank you for having us. You all were wonderful.
Thank you both so much for joining us. It's been an absolute pleasure. And I am going to finish by saying thank you to Enolia. We've been doing these programs for about 2.5 years now. Sort of 2 a month, yes. 2.5 years. And Enolia is taking a step back. This is her final program because so much is going on in her life. And it's really important. And I think this fits really well with this. It is really important to be true to you. If you no longer feel you can give the full energies that you should to something, if something has served its purpose, it is time to let it go. So Enolia, thank you so much. It's been an absolute pleasure and an honor. I know that we think about things very differently in some ways, but there's so much meeting of minds as well, which has been absolutely brilliant. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Sara Jane. It's been truly, truly an honor. Please never stop giving and being you. I remember when we were starting out, Sara Jane interviewed me 4 times, and I was like, I've never done a podcast before. I've always wanted to do one. And here we are on today's conversation 2.5 years later. And it's been a wonderful stint. I've enjoyed every moment of it. I've enjoyed so many beautiful people. So again, thank you, David and Scott. And Sara Jane, it's always been a pleasure.
It's absolute pleasure. And we aren't stopping today's conversation. Carrying on, I am being joined by Patricia Iris Kerrins, who Enolia has met. She's going to join me as a co-host of the program. And it's just going to be the 2 of us in a fortnight's time on the 11th of January. Is there evidence of spiritual evolution? Which I think actually goes on really nicely from this week's program. So thank you to each and every one of you and to all our listeners that have watched these programs and will continue to watch these programs. We share them, as we have all said, because we wish to support each and every one of you on your journey. So thank you, Scott. Thank you, David. Thank you, Enolia. Thank you.
Happy New Year, everybody.
Yes. Lots of love to you. Love, peace, and light. Namaste. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.